Welcome to another episode of Pit Lane Parlay.
Welcome to another episode of Pit Lane Parlay. I am your host, Mike Jokum, joined today by IMSA driver Ben Waddell. Ben, how are you?
I'm wonderful. How are you?
I'm hanging in there, man. You know, like I was saying before we started recording here, just making the best of each day and trying to keep myself entertained on a quiet weekend. But I'm going to dive right into it here. We're about a half hour as of you and I are talking from the next IndyCar iRacing event. I was reading a little bit about you earlier, and you are quite an accomplished iRacer. So what's iRacing like? Is it helping you stay busy during this downtime? And then I'll have one follow-up question on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, iRacing's essentially the main tool I've been using my entire career. Fortunately, my father, Ben Waddell, had a connection with iRacing when they were first getting started. And around, I think I was 12 or 13 years old when we were beta testing for them. And, you know, just with my dad being the background in racing he had, I just drove all the time as a kid, not being able to go go-karting or anything like that. So I just focused on hard sim racing as much as I could and never thought racing was a possibility. But then once I got into real racing, I realized that iRacing does such a good job that my brain didn't really know the difference. So that was a huge part of why I still use iRacing. And I think a lot of drivers that in this downtime of, you know, the whole COVID-19 stuff, other drivers that weren't really big sim guys are really realizing how great of a tool it can be.
Yeah, we've seen lots of good Twitch streams from various guys iRacing on different platforms. Are you going to be part of the official IMSA iRacing event that I think starts this coming Thursday, if I'm not mistaken?
Yeah, so it is April 16th. And that's at Laguna Seca. I was a part of the first one with the growth and the interest that the first one showed. Unfortunately, I kind of got pulled out of it last minute just because so many drivers wanted to be a part of it and kind of, you know, just being on the lower on the totem pole. I kind of got the boot going into this race, but they're talking about then running another whole series with GT4 and the TCR car because, you know, with the grid can only be so big. So, yeah, but it should be a really cool race, really cool event. And, you know, after the first one that I was able to participate in at Sebring, it had a lot of excitement around it for sure.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun to watch. I believe you're also iRacing the Formula 4 car, if I'm not mistaken. Did I read correctly, or am I making that up?
No, you read that correctly, got the car wrong. F3 car. Yeah,
I was close.
The F3 car. Yeah. But it's just the SCCA, the F4 Americas, or FR Americas. And it's just, you know, they were putting on another little series. And my buddy Dakota Dickerson, who raced F3, kind of asked if I could be a part of it, just, you know, make the grid bigger. And fortunately, they let me be a part of it as I was an F4 driver a few years ago. And so that's been a blast every Tuesday night.
One last sim racing question here before we move on. If you were to just pick any car and any track on iRacing, what would your go-to combination be?
That's tough. Belle Isle, that iRacing released just a few months ago, the street course with all the bumps where you have to just be as precise as possible, I really, really enjoy that. And as far as the car, I would say GTE car. Those cars have a good balance of grip and competition, and you can race them in the sprint races or the endurance races with all your friends, and those are kind of the two combinations I've always had a real blast with and had the best racing.
Awesome. So real quick, I'm curious your thoughts on your new teammate this year, AJ Muss. And part two of that is there any chance you're going to be getting some snowboarding lessons from him?
Well, AJ Muss is an awesome teammate to have. We kind of grew up just in a similar way with being part of big team sports, whether it be football or him snowboarding or, so our personalities really, really mesh well and we get along, and, he's been a pleasure to work with, and, he's an Olympian snowboarder. So his tenacity and the way he absorbs information is quite fascinating to watch, with Daytona being his first ever road course race at all. And just the way he put his ego aside, being an Olympian snowboarder, realizing I have a lot to learn here, and it was just a real pleasure. But hopefully someday we can get on the mountain. I can be a sponge towards him, because I would absolutely love it. And the amount of speed he carries on that snowboard is pretty impressive as well.
Yeah, I was watching some YouTube highlights of that, and that's when I realized I will probably never be able to actually snowboard. But
I was shocked when I've seen slalom skiing, and with the two skis and stuff, you're like, okay, that makes sense. Those guys are really going fast. But I didn't realize how fast those guys go on the snowboards too. And it's the same thing. I YouTubed it. It was quite impressive.
Yeah, I agree there. So speaking of your 2020 season, you guys got through Daytona. Do you have what were your expectations going into the season? I know it's kind of all up in the air right now as the schedules are changing, as new information about the virus and whatnot come out. So any expectations and what plans do you have to keep growing as a team throughout the year?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think going into Daytona, we had no clue what to expect, and we had really low expectations. And with the experience I have, my main goal was just go as fast as I could and just get the result we could. But with AJ being his first race, I was on the radio with him and before the race, just, it's a long race. He's, his whole life has been 30 seconds as fast as you can go. Where now he's hopping into a 4-hour endurance race. So that was the main thing, was just, we didn't have any expectations. It was just try to run consistent, save the tires, and he did a phenomenal job. Unfortunately, we had a few radio issues, but going into the rest of the season, it was really promising after that first race, watching how fast he grew and how fast he was going. And so overall, I think our main goal is to kind of just be in the top 5 and really put the pressure on Herta and the other Hyundais. And I think we'll have a really good chance with how much AJ's improving and stuff like that.
Awesome. And yeah, you mentioned radio issues. AJ and I talked about that last week or the week before, how he had no dash and no radio. So he was pretty much driving blind. When you got in the car after his stint, was anything able to get resolved, or were you also having some issues during your the second stint of the race?
Yeah, so luckily, yeah, I mean, we were able to resolve some of it. The dash didn't really act up, so I could still read my fuel numbers, and all was good there. But we kind of had to think real quick, and basically what we did was plug in a mechanic's radio, and as we did our driver change, we taped it into my helmet, and then I hooked the portable radio onto the window net as I got in, just to hopefully eliminate the chance at all that maybe the car radio will work. So luckily that worked, and I could hear the team. As you know, since it was a mechanic radio, I couldn't talk back. But overall, I had no troubles. We experienced a little bit of a steering pump that was cracked just from AJ working hard to try to get up through the field. But overall, I was pretty trouble free. But for AJ to have all the issues he did, let alone being just the overwhelming, variables of his first ever race, I mean, it was quite impressive the way he was able to stay calm and just try to get the best out of it. Because with the cautions coming out and the class splits and the wave rounds and when our pit lane open for our class, and for him to try to even manage all that, let alone without a radio, we did the best we could. But overall, I didn't have much problems at all. I was just trying to go as fast as I could.
Yeah, I like that radio workaround. I guess it's as good as you can get given the circumstances. But moving on from that, is there one track that you haven't driven on that would be kind of like a bucket list track to get to experience?
Ooh, I think, of course, you always have the Monacos, you have the European tracks. I would say here in America, I've been very fortunate to race a lot of iconic tracks, just being part of IMSA and a part of the US F4 championship. But I would have to say, overall, Spa would be pretty badass or pretty cool to, really go up through a Rouge and go back into the forest and experience that iconic track. That would be definitely a bucket list track for sure.
Oh, yeah, I agree. And I know my co-host, Matt, he would certainly agree, and many of our listeners would as well. So you drove F4. You've been driving the TCR cars for a couple of years now. What are the main differences between the two, at least in terms of driving style and how they cooperate with you?
Well, going into Daytona, it was the first time driving those TCR cars, just front-wheel drive, quite a bit of horsepower actually for the lightweight and compact car it is, and it's just vastly different. With the front-wheel drive car, it's all about, carrying a lot of entry speed and getting that car pointed where you want it to, and, eliminating a lot of wheel spin. But with the F4 car, not a lot of horsepower, still pretty light, and you have a lot of, somewhat quite a bit of tire and grip. So, adapting to all those, and with running LMP3 last year for the last 2 years before TCR as well, and it's just, you have to, going into the weekend, you just have to mentally realize that, okay, with, say, the LMP3 car, it's all about the entry speed, but getting back to power as soon as you can and unwinding your hands, where the TCR car, the more power, the earlier you add power, the more understeer you get with the being front-wheel drive. So overall, they've been a blast. I've been very fortunate to drive the cars I've driven, but the TCR car was quite a blast to race. And with being front-wheel drive and the way Hyundai set up that Veloster is actually quite impressive for how much grip and braking force it has for being a front-wheel drive car.
Awesome. So a couple more questions here. First off, you mentioned your dad, road racer, sports car racer, and now driver coach for some of the biggest teams in the world out there. What's it like being the son of a famous driver or driver coach? Does it add any pressure when you're driving? Is he your typical sports dad critiquing everything, or does he kind of take it hands off?
I love that question because I get it a lot, and my dad being considered, one of the best driver coaches in the world, of course, it's just an absolute blessing, I guess you could say, with what I'm trying to do. But overall, I do like it. During the race weekends, he's almost non-existent, which is something he's always told me is he wants me to grow as a driver, communicate, deal with the ups and downs, and not, kind of comfort me. or, you know, be a barrier for other variables. And so, but at the moment we walk into the hotel room, it's, all right, let me see the video. This is what you need. I saw was working. This is what I saw out there on the track. This is what you need to work on, stuff like that. So overall, it's a really good balance, and you know, it's helped me tremendously. But there is definitely a little bit of pressure. I do find myself when I am there out of the track, what's my dad thinking? Do I look really slow? Am I impressing him? You know, stuff like that I have to kind of easily wipe out of my mind and focus on driving. But every once in a while it does pop into my head. What's he thinking? How does he, you know, what is he going to say? Stuff like that. What corner is he looking at? Stuff like that. But overall, it's a big blessing for sure to have a dad that has so much experience, and it's helped me, I mean, astronomically for sure.
Are there any good or potentially funny stories about your dad and his racing career that you are able to share?
Let me think here. I mean, overall, I think the one thing that is, I wouldn't say it's necessarily a story, but just like we get quite a bit, is somehow genetically in the makeup of me, I am a lot larger than my dad. So it's quite funny where, you know, my dad's nickname is B-Dub, and they call me Big B-Dub, and, you know, my dad's always a funny joke of, you know, I keep trying to not feed him, but, you know, he just keeps getting bigger, and so stuff like that. And as we know in racing, you know, weight and size is not your friend inside the car, but, you know, definitely that's kind of a funny, you know, joke that goes around the paddock with just, you know, just coming from football and being as big as I am, but also trying to be a race car driver is, you know, a little contradictory, but we're trying to make it work.
I love it. So one last question about him. The best lesson he's taught you in your racing career?
Well, the best lesson, but also the simplest one, is the line is the line. Whenever, if you're over driving, if you're barely missing the apex, you know, always remember that the shortest way around the racetrack and the best radius around the corner. And that's truly just the simplest thing. You know, in the heat of the moment, the track heats up, or temperature-wise, or, you know, your tires are getting old, you start to keep pushing because the lap time goes down. But at the end of the day, if you're wide of the apex, if you're sneaking in early on turn-in, stuff like that, you're going to go slower no matter what tires or what fuel or what temperature it is. And so I think it's so simple, but it's helped me, you know, in the heat of battle if a guy's slowly pulling away from me or something like that, or I'm not getting the lap times I want, I always revert back. It's just the line is the line, you know. And from there on, that's when you work on setup to make the car handle better on the racing line. So it's super simple, but one of the best tools that's helped me stay calm and trust the physics of the car.
I love it. So I'll wrap it up here with one final question. Ben, thanks again for joining me this afternoon. And this is an easy one. We are building a Pit Lane Parlay Spotify playlist picked by every driver we talked to this year. So one song or one artist that you'd listen to before the race.
Oh, before the race. Honestly, I've always believed in staying calm. I've always been someone that I've tried to always value how you deal with pressure. And I'm very strange in the sense of when I go into a race or something, I listen to just calm music. I try to get my brain as focused and just zoned in or zoned out, I guess you could say. It's just focusing on the task at hand and getting my heart rate down. And it's super strange. I don't know if you've ever heard of him, but his name is Petit Biscuit, which is a very strange artist, but it's someone that is something that kind of gets my adrenaline going somewhat, but also it somehow relaxes me and keeps me focused at task and ease my nerves. So yeah.
I can't say I've heard of that one, but I am very curious now. I'm learning a lot of different artists from asking this question over the last couple of weeks or months or so. So I will definitely add it to the list. Ben, thanks again very much for joining me, man. Best of luck in 2020 when we're able to get going again. And stay safe, man.
Absolutely. And thank you very, very much for having me. It was a pleasure. And, hopefully we'll see each other at a racetrack. Who knows when, but hopefully soon.
Yes, agreed. Have a good afternoon, and thanks very much.
You as well. Thank you.
Thanks.